So, Mary, you were there right at the beginning of what we now call the modern hospice movement. What led you to begin that journey?
Well, of course, Graham, really, I was there before the beginning, because going back, I was a medical student with Cicely and knew her quite well. I met her in 1954, so that's a very long time ago. We were medical students together at St Thomas's. We were in the Christian Union together, and so I knew her well. And I knew why this remarkable lady was studying medicine. And I have to say, I thought it was quite extraordinary. I'd gone into medicine, also I thought, to cure people. This lady, who was much older than the rest of us, having been a nurse and a social worker before she studied medicine, was going into medicine to help the dying. And I thought it was very odd. And if you'd asked me then whether I thought anything would come of it, I'd have said, oh no.
You probably knew Cicely more than anybody, Mary. What sort of person was she? What motivated her? And tell us a little bit about her story.
Let me tell you Cicely's story, because that's what led her to go into medicine. She was born in 1918, so we've just celebrated at St Christopher's in June the 100th anniversary of her birth, and the new book has been launched, a biography of hers, which I've got a copy here you can look at if you like. That was launched then. So she was born in 18. She had an unhappy childhood, sadly. Her parents later divorced, so they separated. She went to a girls' boarding school where she was also unhappy, and went from there to Oxford University to read politics, philosophy and economics, the sort of top degree. But then the war came, the 39-45 war, and she felt it was wrong to be studying books when there was practical work to be done. So she left Oxford, much to the annoyance both of her family and the people at Oxford, and she went to St Thomas's Hospital, London, and trained to be a nurse. She loved nursing and felt that in that she'd found her vocation, but she had a bad back, and the lifting that was then involved in nursing was making her back worse, and she was advised that she must not continue nursing, but was allowed to qualify and become a state-registered nurse. But she wanted to remain in touch with patients, so she decided to retrain as a social worker. And she did that both at Oxford and at St Thomas's, and it was while she was training as a social worker that two very remarkable things happened. The first was in 1945. Cicely had called herself an atheist, or sometimes an agnostic, mostly an atheist. But she wished she could have a faith. And then at that stage, things both in the world and in her own family made her long for a faith even more, to support her in what was happening. She started reading Christian books. She went on holiday with some Christian friends, and it was then that faith, God, became real to her. She loved that hymn, "Just as I Am," and she applied it to herself. And she became, from that day on, an active Christian. And she prayed a most remarkable prayer, and this is how it goes. Lord, what must I do to say thank you and to serve? Pretty good prayer. She had to wait 2 years before she got the answer to that. And then she did, in meeting this young man, David Tasler. Let me tell you about David. David was a Polish Jew. And you know what happened to Polish Jews. He'd come from Poland to this country, and he was working as a waiter He'd lost all his family and he had few friends. And then on top of it all, age 40, he developed cancer, from which, when Cicely met him, he was coming to the end of his life. He had no visitors. Cicely really became his only friend. She visited him while he was in St. Thomas's, and then he went back to his home, and then he was admitted to another hospital, Highgate Hospital, for the final part of his illness. And the two of them talked together about David and his needs, which were many, and were not being met in that hospital nor when he went home. Severe physical pain from his cancer, which was badly controlled with injections from time to time of a strong opioid. He had emotional and social pain. He had nobody to talk to and no family to care for him. And he had spiritual pain. He'd been brought up a Jew. His grandfather was an Orthodox rabbi. But since he'd come to London, he hadn't practiced his faith, and he didn't know whether he believed in God or not. Cicely, much later on, talked about total pain, physical, emotional, social, and spiritual, and that we need to relieve in people who are dying. And she learnt that at the bedside of this man. And as they talked, there came to them both an idea of a better way to look after people in the future. A place set apart specially for their needs. And when he died, she found that he'd left her £500, worth so much more now, with the words, famous words, "I will be a window in your home." If you visit St. Christopher's, and I'm always taking people round St. Christopher's, I would show you David's window. So something a bit about David, whom she met. And it was through that contact with David that Cicely felt she was given the answer to her prayer. What must she do? She needs to do something to improve the care of those at the end of life.
So St Christopher's, the first hospice in the UK, was opened in 1967. So what were the early days like, Mary, there?
I haven't got, Graham, to how I got there quite. So I was a medical student with Cicely. And then, you know, when you finish college or university, you quite often lose touch with people. And I regret to say that I lost touch with Cicely. I got married, we had our 3 children, and I became a part-time general practitioner, and very happy I was in that, and thought that was where I would stay. But in 1964, I will never forget that time. I was at home with the children, my husband was out, and I switched on the radio. And who should I hear on the radio but my old friend, Cicely Saunders, giving what was then called This Week's Good Cause Appeal. Any of you remember that? On behalf of the hospice she planned to build. I'd been wrong, dreadfully wrong all the time. I didn't think that anything would come of it, and here she was, giving an appeal on the BBC for the hospice. I sent her, and I don't think the financial people here would be particularly pleased about this, I sent her £3. which wasn't a great lot then, but is nothing much now, I found out that in English money it's worth £42 and 10 pence. So it's slightly better. And I wrote to Cicely and became a friend of St Christopher's. And then my husband moved, in fact, from Tunbridge Wells to a job in Beckenham. And I got another practice to work in, general practice, and thought that would be where I was going. But I got this letter from Cicely saying that as I was a local GP and would be sending her patients, would I like to come and see round the hospice better than I could at the official opening. I regret to say that that letter was not really the truth. She didn't want me as a local GP to see round St Christopher's. She wanted to invite me to join her on the staff. And I thought about it and wrote back to Cicely and said, no, thank you. General practice was a steady job, and whatever was going to happen to hospice, nobody had ever heard of anybody working full-time in a hospice. But I thought about it, and we prayed about it, and it seemed the right thing. So in fact, in April '68, a few months after its opening, I very fearfully joined St Christopher's on the medical staff. Now the early days.
And then soon afterwards you were asked to start the first home care service. I think that was in 1968. And tell us about, or 69, tell us why that was so important, Mary.
Yes, it started St Christopher's purely as an inpatient unit. The beginning with 54 beds, patients came in, they were pleased to be cared for, and they remained there really till they died, with very few exceptions. And then one woman whom I can remember, with breast cancer, secondaries in bones, and a lot of pain, came into St Christopher's. We relieved her pain on a moderate dose of diamorphine, the strong painkiller we were then using. But she surprised us all, especially Cicely, by saying something like this: thank you so much for having me here and relieving my pain. But actually, I'd rather go home. So we made preparations for this. I rang the GP, told him about the drugs. We sent her home with a week or 10 days cover and waved her goodbye. About 4 days later, her husband was on the phone saying his wife was in agony. Could she please come back immediately? We said yes, of course, and admitted her back again. And then we found out what had happened. The GP had been horrified at the dose of diamorphine she was on. He thought we were turning his patient into an addict. He'd reduced the dose and planned to stop it. With the result, of course, that the pain came back. It was easy to get her pain back again, better. But it was a sad story, because she never wanted to go home again. She lost her nerve, and she wanted to stay in St Christopher's until she died. But it was that made Cicely say, we must start something at home care, and we must start it now. Sometimes people say, Cicely asked me to start home care. That's not true, Graham. If you knew Cicely, you'd know that she wasn't a great person for asking. She was much better at telling you what to do. So that's what she did.
Mary, did you imagine in those early years that hospice was going to spread all over the world. And how did that happen?
Well, Graham, Sicily gave people like me two aims at the beginning. The first, of course, was to look after the patients in the wards, and then later on under home care to the best of our ability. That was obvious. But there was a second aim too. And that was, and I hesitate to say it, because it sounds a bit over the top, but it was to change the world's view of dying. And so, right from the beginning, that was our aim, as well as looking after our patients. And so, at the beginning, we welcomed people to St. Christopher's. And people came, people from this country and people from all over the world. I'll never forget one Tuesday morning, and I was planning to do a ward round on one of the wards, and there was a phone from Sicily saying, not, please Mary, would you, but I have in my office a doctor from India, Mary, who is coming on your ward round. And I would a bit groan, really, because I would know that it would make the ward round longer, and I probably wouldn't get any coffee, and I might be late for lunch. But actually that doctor, a surgeon from what we then called Bombay, now Mumbai, he had heard about St. Christopher's, was concerned about the thousands of patients who came to him for treatment of their cancer when it was beyond active treatment. And all he could do was to try and do palliative care and pain control. And he'd heard of St. Christopher's. And I showed him round on the ward round, and he went back and he started hospice care in India. And now it's in many, many places in that vast country, or subcontinent as we call it. So that's the sort of thing that happened. Sicily herself went round the world and lectured. But when I first came to St. Christopher's, my younger son was 3, so I wasn't really fit for going round the world. But Sicily herself did. And we wrote books and articles. So we did as much as we could to spread it.
Mary, you went to Romania even before I did, I think sometime in the early 70s. What took you there?
My husband had to take early retirement because of his deafness, and he became a volunteer for an organisation called Keston College, which supported and made known the plight of Christians and believers of other faiths as well, behind the Iron Curtain. And this was quite a frightful thing. If you want now to find out what's happening in Romania, of course you'll send them an email or ring them up. But you couldn't do that then. And the Christians and other faiths were being persecuted, and they wanted people in the West to know. And the only way people could know was by actually going out there and finding out, or sometimes getting literature smuggled back into this country. And so Ted, my husband, went once to Moscow, and we decided together to go to Romania. It was quite a frightening thing to do, Graham.
Sure.
Not that, in fact, we would be in danger as visitors from England, but our Romanian friends would be in danger if they were seen or heard talking in English to some foreign visitors. And the church would be in danger too. So when we went to the church, we left the car several roads away because people could identify it as a hired car, and walked in a rather zigzag way to get to the church. So that's why we went to Romania.
Mary, you were present at the very first hospice conference in Brașov in 1992 when the hospice concept was introduced to Romania. What do you remember about that conference?
Oh, that was terribly exciting. We were there out together, both of us, Graham, Ted and myself. I suppose what was so exciting was the enthusiasm of people. This conference was put on and booked in a hotel in Poana Brașov. And I've forgotten the exact numbers, Graham, but you catered for so many and there were this number who came.
Yeah, I think we catered for 70 and there were 150 who turned up.
So if you were hungry, that was not a good conference to go to. But a number of them spoke up as well, and it was so exciting to me because what we were not doing is to put down a project in Brașov that we thought was right for Brașov. We were doing our best to find out what they felt would be appropriate for their place. And that's indeed what I did with the home care service, going round and finding what is appropriate, because it's different in every country. I often say at St Christopher's when I take people round, I can tell you a little bit about what hospice does, pain control and support for families. What I must never tell you about is how you do it. You have to work out the how, and that's what the people in Romania helped you to do, Graham.
Exactly.
How it was done. So I was very excited to be part of that, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, you've played such an important role in Hospices of Hope over the years. You've been a trustee, you've been a lecturer, you've supported and encouraged me all through that time. I just wondered if you have a message for our staff in Southeast Europe, because of course we've expanded into Serbia and the Republic of Moldova and now into Albania, but also to the people here who support us.
I guess my first, I've got two, thing to say to you is well done. Congratulations. In the hospice world, one of the great beacons is the hospice in Romania. I know that. It's looked up to from all many other countries. It was one of the places that the Bosch conference, a big conference we had at St Christopher's partly, and they also went to Romania. Why? Because it's not only influencing Romania and these other countries, but it's what they call a beacon for the world of hospice. And so well done to you here supporting it, and of course even more so to the people working out there. Well done. Now, I can't tell people what you should be doing. I can't tell you how to do it. But I would commend to you for yourselves and to the hospices in Eastern Europe, in Romania, Serbia, Moldova, Albania, and others, Graham, that have helped for advice to you. There are others as well, as we know. That prayer that Cicely had at the beginning. What must I do? What must we do to say thank you and to serve? I don't know, of course I don't know, sitting here, how the Romanian work should develop, or maybe it shouldn't develop, it should stay as it is and inspire other people to develop. But I'm sure if they really want to know, they will be shown. What must I do to say thank you and to serve?
And what do you see, Mary, as the challenges for hospice and palliative care, as it's often known now, in the future?
I think one of the problems, Graham, one of the challenges really, is who we should be looking after. Now, I don't think that this probably affects you in Romania, but the English hospices are struggling with this a bit. As you probably know, when Cicely started St Christopher's, she focused nearly completely, but not completely, on cancer. Why? Because that seems to be where the greatest suffering was, with uncontrolled pain from cancer. And the marvellous thing now is that I can say, and you can say, to friends who may be in this position, that hospice has changed the fear of pain, because genuinely pain, with very, very few exceptions, can be very well controlled. Isn't it marvellous to be able to say that? And that's what hospice has done. So the challenge is not that, as it was at the beginning. We looked after and concentrated on cancer patients, with some with motor neuron disease. Now the net is much wider. And I think this is right. People who are dying of all sorts of other diseases. But hospices will have to show, and it's a challenge to all of us working there. Some years ago, you probably know, there was quite a panic in this country as to whether we would be facing an epidemic of HIV/AIDS. And there was a lot of pressure on St Christopher's to admit a lot of patients with HIV/AIDS. And the people thought outside that we didn't really admit them, except for one or two that were very, very near the end. We wouldn't admit them because in some way we didn't approve of their lifestyle or whatever. It was nothing to do with that. It was entirely because me as a doctor didn't know enough about AIDS to look after them properly. I wouldn't entrust a relative of mine with AIDS to somebody like me with my knowledge, and it's a great big lot of knowledge. So now we're facing increasing, not through AIDS, thank God, but with other illnesses, the number of people we look after. But don't forget that that will mean that the staff have to know all about heart failure, or respiratory failure, or renal failure, or just really perhaps a slow death from dementia. So it's a difficult, what should we be looking after? Challenges in the future. I'm not going to say money. Of course money is a challenge. But having been brought up in Sicily's time, I know your finance people won't approve of me when I say this, Cicely started St Christopher's and ran it. What she used to say was faith and an overdraft. Now that works okay if the faith is there. If you lose the faith, the overdraft pulls it down.
So 50 years later, Mary, when you started, as you say, a little bit reluctantly your hospice career, what do you feel are the most important things now to take away from all that you've learnt and what the hospice movement stands for? And is it really important that we remember the guiding principles that you've talked about?
What do you all think? Do you think it's helpful to know how it all started? And I think it's an exciting story. Yeah. I've been to talks where they highlight Wilberforce and Shaftesbury as two great people of the past who put their faith into action. And I often feel we should add Cicely Saunders as well. And it would have far more impact today, because there are few people really now, I would think, among your neighbours and your family, who haven't known somebody, woman down the road, friend from school days, who's been affected by hospice. And to be able to tell them something of this extraordinary story. It's a marvellous story too, if any of you are teachers for children. I've done it once or twice in girls' schools. I don't think my boys' schools would be all right. As to what can be achieved through one person. And I think it's worth having it more widely known. And I hope you'll be able to do that.
Thank you so much, Mary.
That's all right.